Case: The Syncytium. I was a research assistant on the Tonga Trench Deep Sea Expedition, working under Dr. Sarah Chen, a microbiologist studying extremophile organisms. We deployed collection traps at 10,800 meters, the deepest part of the trench, hoping to find novel bacterial species that could survive the crushing pressure and total darkness. What we brought up was something else entirely. The samples looked normal at first. Bacterial cultures, some multicellular organisms, the usual suspects from Hadal's own collection. Dr. Chen was examining them in the lab module when she noticed something odd. The cells were merging, not dividing, merging. Two cells would touch, and their membranes would dissolve where they made contact. The cytoplasm would flow together, the nuclei would fuse, two organisms becoming one. She called it Syncytium formation, said it was rare but documented in some species. But this was different. This was aggressive, intentional. The merged cells would seek out other cells, merge with those, grow larger. Within hours, we had masses of fused tissue growing in the petri dishes, pulsing with coordinated contractions. Dr. Chen was fascinated. She increased the sample size, started documenting the merger process. The organisms were incorporating everything: bacteria, algae, even bits of organic matter we'd collected, building themselves into something larger. By day 3, the cultures had grown too large for the dishes. Dr. Chen transferred them to sealed containers, larger vessels where they could continue growing. She was talking about publications, about revolutionary discoveries in cellular biology, about rewriting our understanding of how complex life could form. On day 5, she cut herself. Just a small accident. A scalpel slipped while preparing a slide. A drop of her blood fell into one of the containers. We watched the Syncytium organism surge toward it, envelope it, absorb it. Dr. Chen washed the cut, bandaged it, went back to work. Said it was fine. The organisms were sealed. No contamination risk. That night, she started complaining of pain in her hand. Said the cut was burning. When we looked, the skin around the wound was red, inflamed, swollen. We could see something moving under the skin. Dark threads, spreading up her arm like veins. The Syncytium had infected her. We tried to cut it out, tried antibiotics, antivirals, everything we had in the medical bay. Nothing worked. The organism was spreading, merging with her cells, incorporating her tissue into its own structure. We could see it under the skin, masses of fused cells, growing, pulsing, spreading. Dr. Chen was conscious the whole time, aware. She could feel it happening, feel her body being absorbed from the inside. She described it as a loss of boundaries, said she could feel where she ended and the organism began, and that line was dissolving. She was becoming part of it. On day 7, we had to put her in quarantine. The infection had spread to her torso, her other arm. Her organs were being incorporated. We could see the masses through her skin, fused tissue replacing her muscle, her fat, her internal structures. She was still breathing, still conscious, but she wasn't entirely human anymore. We were 3 days from the nearest port. The captain called for emergency evacuation, but we were too far out. All we could do was keep her isolated and hope she survived long enough to get real medical help. She didn't. On day 9, Dr. Chen started having seizures. The Syncytium had reached her brain. We could see it through her eyes. The whites had turned dark, filled with merged tissue. She stopped responding to questions. Just lay there, breathing, twitching, while the organism consumed her from within. On day 10, we reached port. A medical team was waiting. They suited up in full hazmat gear, prepared to extract her from quarantine and transport her to a hospital. They opened the airlock. Dr. Chen burst. That's the only way I can describe it. Her body came apart, splitting along the seams where the syncytium had weakened the tissue. Masses of fused cells erupted from her torso, her limbs, her head. The organism had grown too large for her body to contain. It exploded outward, searching for new material to incorporate. The medical team scattered. The organism splashed across the deck, across the walls, still pulsing, still trying to merge with anything organic it touched. The captain hit the emergency sterilization protocol, flooded the airlock with superheated steam, burned everything inside to ash. We watched Dr. Chen die a second time. Watched the organism that had been her body shrivel and cook and finally stop moving. The samples we'd collected were incinerated. The lab module was sterilized. Every surface Dr. Chen had touched was scrubbed with industrial bleach. We were all tested, examined, quarantined for 2 weeks to make sure we hadn't been infected. The official report said equipment failure, contamination from improper handling of deep-sea samples. Dr. Chen's death was ruled accidental, but I was there. I saw what came up from the Tonga Trench. I saw what it did to her. Saw her body become a host for something that shouldn't exist, something that merged and absorbed and grew until there was nothing left of the person she'd been. The deep ocean is full of life we don't understand. Life that evolved under conditions so extreme, so alien, that our biology can't comprehend it. We bring these things to the surface, study them, think we can control them. But we can't. Some things should stay in the abyss. Some discoveries aren't worth making. Dr. Chen learned that the hard way. Case: the Baltic Anomaly. We were diving on the Baltic Anomaly, that weird circular formation on the seafloor that everyone thought might be a UFO, or an ancient structure, or just a glacial deposit. Our submersible was equipped with high-def cameras, sonar, sampling equipment. We were going to settle the debate once and for all. The descent was normal. We dropped through the murky Baltic water, watching the depth gauge tick up. 100 meters, 150, 200. The anomaly was at 87 meters, sitting on a flat stretch of seafloor that was otherwise unremarkable. When we reached it, I'll admit I was disappointed. It looked like rock. Weird rock, maybe. Too circular, too symmetrical, but still, just rock. Our pilot, Mikael, positioned the sub for a closer look. We were about 10 meters away, lights on full, when the sonar started acting strange. Contacts, multiple contacts, moving around us. But there was nothing visible. The water was clear. Well, clear for the Baltic. And our lights were illuminating everything within 20 meters. No fish, no debris, nothing. Then I saw the shadow. It was on the port side, just at the edge of our light beam, human-shaped, standing upright on the seafloor, like someone in a diving suit. But we were the only sub in the area. The surface crew confirmed. No other divers, no other vessels. I pointed it out to Mikael. He rotated the sub, brought the lights around. The shadow moved, stayed at the edge of the light, just barely visible, always upright, always watching. Then we saw another one. Starboard side. Same thing. Human-shaped, standing, watching. The sonar showed more contacts. 6, 8, 10. Surrounding us. Mikael tried to raise the surface. The comms crackled but wouldn't connect. He tried again. Nothing. We were alone. 87 meters down. Surrounded by shadows that looked like people. One of them moved closer. Walked. Actually, walked. Across the seafloor toward us. I could see details now. It was humanoid, but wrong. Too tall, limbs too long, head too large. And it was translucent, like we were seeing through it to the water beyond. It reached the submersible, reached out with a hand that had too many fingers, and tapped on the viewport. 3 times. Deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. I screamed. Mikael hit the ballast release, trying to emergency ascend. Nothing happened. The sub didn't move. We were stuck, pinned somehow, and the shadow thing was still at the window, tapping. More of them approached, surrounded the sub. I could hear them now. Not sound, exactly, but vibration through the hall. Rhythmic tapping all around us. They were communicating or testing us, or trying to get in. Mikhail was shouting into the dead comms, hitting switches, trying everything. The subsystems were failing, lights flickering, oxygen recycler making a grinding noise, depth gauge spinning wildly. Then we started descending, not rising, descending. The sub was sinking, dropping deeper than it should, deeper than the seafloor. I looked out the viewport and saw we were moving down through the anomaly itself. It wasn't rock, it was an opening, a hole in the seafloor, perfectly circular, leading down into darkness. The shadows followed us, surrounding the sub, tapping on the hull, guiding us down. 100 meters, 150, 200. Deeper than the sub was rated for, the hull was groaning, metal creaking under the pressure. Mikhail was praying. In Swedish, words I didn't understand, but the terror in his voice was universal. I was watching the depth gauge, watching us drop past 300 meters, 350, knowing the hull would implode any second. Then we stopped. Just stopped. The sub hung there in the darkness, systems still failing, surrounded by shadows. And in front of us, visible in the dying light of our floods, was a structure. Not natural, not human. Something else. Walls made of material that looked like stone but moved like liquid. Corridors branching in impossible directions, and things moving inside. Shapes, shadows, more of them than I could count. The sub's main light died. We were in darkness except for the emergency backup, a weak red glow that barely illuminated the viewport. The tapping had stopped. The shadows were gone. Then the sub lurched upward. We shot toward the surface like we'd been launched. The depth gauge spun backward. 300, 250, 200, 100. We breached the surface so hard the sub actually left the water, crashed back down with an impact that cracked the viewport. The surface crew was screaming on the comms, asking where we'd been. They'd lost contact for 3 hours. 3 hours we'd been down there, but it had felt like 10 minutes. We got the sub on deck. Mikhail and I climbed out, shaking, barely able to stand. The technical team examined the sub. The hull was damaged, not from pressure but from something else. Scratches, long thin scratches all over the exterior, like something with claws or fingers had been holding it. The footage was corrupted. Everything we'd recorded was static and distortion. The sonar logs showed nothing. Officially, we'd experienced equipment failure and temporary disorientation at depth. But I know what I saw. Those shadows, that structure, that opening in the seafloor that shouldn't exist. The Baltic anomaly isn't a crashed UFO or a glacial formation, it's a door. And something on the other side is watching, waiting, testing. Case: the abyssal rig. The drilling platform was positioned over the Mariana Trench, extracting core samples from 11,000 meters below. I was part of the engineering crew, maintaining the equipment, monitoring the drill operations. We'd been out there for 6 weeks, and everything had been running smoothly, until the blackout. It happened during night shift. The entire rig lost power. Lights, computers, life support, everything. Emergency backups kicked in after 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds in total darkness, with the ocean groaning below us, were the longest of my life. When the lights came back up, the drill was running. We hadn't started it. The system was locked down for maintenance, but the drill was active, descending, the cable paying out faster than it should. The depth readout showed it passing 11,000 meters, then 12,000, then deeper. We tried to stop it, hit the emergency brake. Nothing. The drill just kept descending, the cable screaming through the guides. the whole rig vibrating with the strain. At 15,000 meters, something grabbed the cable. We felt it through the entire platform, a massive jolt, like something enormous had seized the drill and was pulling. The cable went taut, the rig tilted, the corner where the drill tower stood dipping toward the water. The winch was screaming, trying to hold against whatever was pulling from below. We could see the cable fraying, individual strands snapping, the whole thing about to tear free. Then the pulling stopped. The cable went slack. The rig leveled out. We stood there, waiting, listening to the creak of metal and the slap of waves against the platform legs. Something came up the cable. We saw it on the external cameras first. Movement, climbing, multiple somethings, flowing up the cable like water running upward. When they reached the surface, we saw what they were. Tentacles. Not like squid tentacles. These were wrong. Too many joints, too many suckers, covered in something that looked like barbs or hooks. They came over the rail, flowed across the deck, searching. The crew scattered. I ran for the accommodation block, sealed the door behind me. Through the window I could see more tentacles coming up. Dozens of them, covering the drill tower, the deck, the equipment. They were pulling, dragging. The rig tilted again, harder this time. The corner where the drill tower stood was sinking, pulled down by whatever was at the end of all those tentacles. The ocean was coming up over the deck, seawater flooding across the platform. Someone hit the emergency beacon. The distress signal went out. Mayday. Platform compromised, requesting immediate evacuation. But the nearest vessel was 6 hours away. We had minutes. The tentacles found the door I was hiding behind. I watched them probe the seal, testing it, looking for a way in. One of them had an eye at the tip, an actual eye, human-sized, rotating to look through the window at me. It saw me. I know it did. The pupil contracted. The tentacle pressed against the glass. The rig was going down. The drill tower was already underwater, the deck flooding fast. I could hear screaming from somewhere else on the platform, metal tearing, the groan of the support legs buckling under impossible strain. I made a decision, ran from the accommodation block, sprinting across the tilted deck toward the lifeboat station. Tentacles everywhere, reaching, grabbing. One caught my leg. The barbs dug in, tearing through my coveralls into my skin. I kicked free, left blood and flesh on the deck, kept running, got to the lifeboat. 2 other crew members were already there, releasing the davits. We dropped into the water just as the rig went under. It didn't sink slowly, it was pulled, dragged down stern first, the drill tower and everything connected to it yanked into the abyss like something was reeling in a fishing line. We watched from the lifeboat as the entire platform, a structure the size of a city block, weighing thousands of tons, disappeared beneath the waves in under a minute. 43 crew members went down with it. The rescue ship found us 12 hours later. 3 survivors out of 46. They recovered some debris, bits of equipment, life jackets. But the rig itself was gone. Sonar showed it had descended past 20,000 meters, deeper than the trench itself, which was impossible. The official report blamed structural failure, catastrophic collapse of the drill tower leading to platform instability. But I was there. I saw what came up that cable, saw the tentacles, the eyes, the deliberate pulling. We drilled too deep, hit something that didn't want to be disturbed, and it dragged us down to where it lived. I still have scars on my leg where the barbs caught me. They're not normal scars. They're black, like the tissue died and never healed properly. And sometimes, at night, I swear I can feel it. The pulling. Like whatever grabbed the rig is still down there, still holding the cable, waiting for something else to drill too deep, waiting to pull it down into the void. Case, the cenote. The cenote was in the Yucatan, a flooded cave system that descended over 200 meters into the limestone. We were a team of 4, me, 2 other divers, and our guide. a local who'd been diving this system for 20 years. The first 100 meters were beautiful. Crystal clear water, stalactites and stalagmites, fish darting through the columns. But we were going deeper, into sections that had only been explored a handful of times. Looking for new passages, new chambers, maybe even a connection to the ocean. At 150 meters, we found the passage, a narrow opening in the cave floor, barely wide enough for a diver with tanks. Our guide went first, disappearing into the darkness. I followed. The passage twisted and turned, getting narrower until I was squeezing through gaps with my tanks scraping the ceiling. Then it opened up. We were in a chamber the size of a cathedral, walls disappearing into darkness beyond our lights. And it was full of fish. Not normal fish. These were pale, almost translucent, with no eyes. Just smooth skin where the eyes should have been. And their mouths were wrong. Too many teeth, needle thin, pointing backward, designed to catch and hold prey that tried to escape. They were everywhere. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, filling the water around us, swimming in circles, attracted by our lights, getting closer. Our guide signaled to leave. Now! We turned to go back through the passage, and that's when my light died. Total darkness. Not just dark, absolute absence of light. I fumbled for my backup light, couldn't find the switch, panic rising. Something brushed against my arm. I felt teeth, not biting, just touching, testing. I got the backup light on. The fish were surrounding me, pressed close, their mouths opening and closing. One of them latched onto my wetsuit sleeve. I felt the teeth penetrate the neoprene, scrape against the skin beneath. I pulled away. The fish held on. More of them were attaching now to my legs, my torso, anywhere they could reach. I was blind. The backup light showed me the fish but not the passage, not my team. I kicked, trying to move, trying to find the opening we'd come through. The fish came with me, attached, their teeth hooked into my wetsuit and skin. I felt the passage, found it with my hands, started pulling myself through. The fish still latching on, more of them following. The passage was narrow, too narrow to fit with all these fish attached to me. I was stuck. Panic took over. I ripped at the fish, tearing them off, feeling their teeth shred the wetsuit, tear chunks of skin. They were in my way, blocking the passage, and I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I don't remember getting out. My brain shut down. Some instinct took over, dragged me through the passage, through the pain, through the fish that kept trying to latch on. When I came to, I was back in the main chamber at 100 meters, my team pulling me up, my wetsuit torn to ribbons. We surfaced, got me on the boat. My body was covered in puncture wounds, hundreds of them, small circular marks where the fish had bitten and held on. The teeth had anticoagulant properties. I bled for hours before it stopped. The other divers had made it out clean. They'd followed the guide, found the passage immediately, ascended without incident. Only I had gotten lost, gotten stuck, gotten attacked. But here's what bothers me. My dive computer showed I'd been in that chamber for 20 minutes. It felt like 2. The computer also showed I'd descended to 180 meters. We'd only planned to go to 150. I'd gone deeper somehow, into parts of the cave I don't remember. And when we examined the fish bites later, the marine biologist said they looked old, healed, like they'd happened weeks ago, not hours. I don't dive caves anymore. Can't do it. Every time I think about descending into darkness, I remember those fish, those eyeless needle-toothed fish that swarmed me in the black water, latching on, holding me down. I remember being lost, being blind, fighting through them, while my air ran low and my mind shut down. And I remember the 20 minutes I can't account for, the depth I shouldn't have reached, the wounds that healed too fast. Something happened in that cenote. Something I don't remember, and I'm not sure I want to. Case: The Shadow. We were in a research submersible at 2,000 meters, documenting deep-sea life in the Atlantic. 3 of us crammed into a titanium sphere the size of a van, dropping through the darkness with our lights and cameras, looking for hydrothermal vents. The sonar pinged. Contact. Big contact. Below us. We stopped descending, hovered at 2,000 meters, watching the sonar screen. The contact was moving, slowly, circling beneath us at maybe 2,100 meters. Our pilot, James, rotated the sub, pointed the main camera down, turned on the floods. The light didn't reach the bottom. We were still 100 meters above the seafloor, but we could see something in the water below us. A shape, darker than the surrounding darkness, moving. It was huge. The sonar estimated at least 30 meters long, maybe more. The shape was wrong, irregular, asymmetrical, like multiple things fused together. And it was rising, coming toward us. James hit the ballast release. We started ascending. Emergency ascent, dropping weights, rising as fast as the sub could manage. But the thing below us was faster. It came up into the light. I saw it through the viewport, saw what it was. A mouth, multiple mouths, all over its body. Circular mouths ringed with teeth that looked like lamprey mouths. Concentric rings of backward-pointing fangs. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, opening and closing, searching. The thing wasn't swimming. It was pulsing, contracting and expanding, using the mouths like jets to propel itself. And it was big, bigger than the sonar had shown. The part we could see was just a section of it. The rest extended beyond our lights, beyond our sensors. It stopped rising, hung there in the water, 50 meters below us. All those mouths stopped moving, stopped searching. They oriented toward us. We were still ascending. 1,900 meters. 1,800. The thing was following, maintaining its distance. All those mouths pointed at the sub. Then it turned around, just turned, rotated its body, or whatever it had instead of a body, so the mouths were facing away from us. And it descended, dropped back into the darkness, moving faster than it had risen. Within seconds it was gone, disappeared beyond the range of our sonar. We surfaced an hour later. The surface crew asked if we'd found anything interesting. James filed his report. No significant contacts. Equipment malfunction with sonar. Mission scrubbed. But we all saw it. All 3 of us watched that thing rise toward us. Watched the mouths orient and track us. Watched it decide we weren't worth pursuing. Later, in the lab, we reviewed the footage. Most of it was corrupted. The camera had failed when we hit the emergency ascent. But we got one frame, one clear image of the thing. It was worse in still photo. You could see details that I had missed in real time. The mouths weren't just lamprey-like. They had other things in them, structures that looked like eyes, or sensors, or something else. And the body, what we could see of it, had patterns. Regular patterns, like scales or plates, but too regular, geometric, artificial almost. The image got classified. We were told not to discuss it, not to mention the dive. Official record says we had equipment failure at depth and surfaced without incident. But I think about it. About those mouths, all oriented at us. About how it rose toward us, then stopped, then turned away. It was deciding, evaluating, measuring whether we were prey or threat or something else. And it decided we weren't worth the effort. That's what scares me. Not that it chased us, but that it looked at us, calculated, and chose to leave. Because what does a 30-meter deep-sea predator consider worth hunting? What prey is dangerous enough, valuable enough, that it saves its energy for those targets instead of wasting time on a small titanium sphere with 3 humans inside? I don't know, and I don't want to find out, but it's down there, at 2,000 meters and deeper, waiting, hunting things we can't imagine. And sometimes it comes up to look at us, to decide if we're worth the effort yet. Case, Challenger, Deep. The live feed from the Challenger Deep submersible was supposed to be routine. Scientific documentation of the deepest point in the ocean, 10,994 meters down. The crew of 2 was conducting a survey, taking samples, filming for public broadcast. I was monitoring the feed from the surface vessel, watching the darkness, the occasional deep-sea creature drifting past the sub's lights. The crew was calm, professional, narrating what they were seeing for the audience. At 10,950 meters, they saw the trench floor. Mud and sediment, mostly barren. Some amphipods scuttling around. Nothing unusual. Then the pilot said, "Wait, what's that?" The camera panned right. In the distance, just at the edge of the light, something was moving. Big. The sonar showed it, but couldn't get a clear reading. The return was scattered, distorted. The co-pilot adjusted the lights, brought up the floods. The thing came into view. It was translucent, almost invisible. Like looking at a jellyfish, except this thing was the size of a city. Tentacles, or what looked like tentacles, extending in all directions. So long they disappeared beyond the camera's range. A body that pulsed and shifted, organs visible inside, if they were organs, structures we couldn't identify. And it was moving, not drifting, moving with purpose. The tentacles were pulling it across the trench floor, each one the width of a building, creating currents that stirred up sediment in massive clouds. The pilot's voice came through the feed. "Command, are you seeing this?" I was. Everyone monitoring the feed was. We were watching a creature the size of a small city moving across the deepest point in the ocean. Something that shouldn't exist. Couldn't exist. The co-pilot started recording measurements, estimating size based on sonar returns and visual reference. The numbers didn't make sense. The thing was over 1 kilometer across, maybe 2 kilometers. Too big for anything living, too big for the ecosystem to support. Then the pilot said, "It's moving toward us." The creature had changed direction. The tentacles were reorienting, pulling the main body toward the sub, slowly but deliberately. Hunting? Curious? We didn't know. The pilot started the ascent. Emergency protocol. If something threatened the sub, you surfaced immediately. The ballast released. The sub started rising. The creature followed. We watched on the feed. The thing was ascending with them, matching their speed, those massive tentacles flowing upward through the water. It was keeping pace, tracking them. At 10,000 meters, the pilot's voice changed. "It's accelerating." The creature was moving faster, gaining on them. We could see it in the camera feed, the translucent mass getting closer, tentacles reaching toward the sub. The feed cut to static. Just static. Audio gone, video gone. We tried to re-establish contact. Nothing. The backup systems kicked in. We got telemetry. The sub was still ascending, systems functional, crew alive. But no cameras, no comms. Just data showing a controlled ascent from depth. The sub surfaced 6 hours later. We got it on deck. The crew was alive, unharmed, but they wouldn't talk. Wouldn't say what happened after the feed cut. They just stared silent until the medical team sedated them and took them away. The sub's exterior was damaged, not crushed, scratched. Long parallel scratches covering the entire hull, like something had run fingers across it. or tentacles. The cameras were gone, torn off their mounts. The communications array was shredded. We reviewed the telemetry. The ascent had taken 6 hours, but the crew insisted it was only 30 minutes. Their watches showed 30 minutes had passed. But the sub's internal clock, the surface vessel's clock, everything else said 6 hours. The footage was classified. The mission was scrubbed from public record. The crew was debriefed, signed NDAs, and retired from deep-sea research. But I saw it. I saw that thing in the Challenger deep, saw it move, saw it follow the sub, and I saw the last frame before the feed cut. The pilot had turned the camera one more time, gotten one final shot of the creature. It had a face. Not exactly a face, more like the suggestion of one. Features barely visible in the translucent flesh. Eyes maybe, a mouth, and it was looking at the camera, looking at us. The pilot's last words before the static, "It's moving, it's..." Then nothing. I don't know what's at the bottom of the Challenger deep, but it's not just mud and amphipods. There's something else down there, something massive, something that followed a submersible to the surface and scraped its tentacles across the hull. Something that made 6 hours feel like 30 minutes. Something that looked at us and decided to let the sub go. This time. Case: the Trieste Station. The Trieste Underwater Research Station was positioned at 4,000 meters, anchored to the seafloor in the Mediterranean. Permanent crew of 12, rotating every 6 months. I was scheduled for the 3rd rotation, arriving just as the 2nd crew was preparing to leave. They looked wrong. That was my first impression. Pale, gaunt, moving strangely, like their bodies didn't quite fit their skin anymore. The station doctor said it was just the effects of long-term isolation and pressure. Nothing to worry about. The handover took 3 days. The outgoing crew showed us the systems, the protocols, the research projects. They were working on a cure for an ocean-borne plague that had been affecting marine life. Bacterial infection that caused mutations, behavioral changes. They'd isolated the pathogen, were developing a countermeasure. On the 3rd day, the outgoing crew left, took the bathysphere to the surface. We watched them go, and I felt relief. Something about them had been off, wrong. The first week was normal. We settled into routines, checked the research, maintained the systems. Then one of our crew, a marine biologist named Sarah, found the notes. The previous crew had been experimenting on themselves. They'd isolated a bacteria from infected fish, cultured it, and injected it, deliberately. They wanted to see if humans could develop immunity, could adapt to the pathogen the way some marine species had. The results were in the notes. Detailed observations of physiological changes, cellular mutations, organ modifications. The crew had been transforming, adapting, becoming something that could survive the plague that was killing the ocean. But the changes didn't stop. The bacteria kept mutating them, kept changing their biology in ways that went beyond immunity, ways that made them less human. We found the lab, hidden behind a false panel, cultures growing in incubators, samples of mutated tissue, and specimens. Preserved specimens from the crew members themselves, organs that had changed structure, skin that had developed new properties, eyes that had split into multiple segments. Sarah wanted to destroy it all, burn the cultures, dump the specimens, purge the lab. But the station commander said no. This was important research, evidence of adaptation to oceanic pathogens. We needed to document it, study it, understand what the previous crew had done. That was a mistake. The bacteria was still active, still viable, and it got out of the lab. I don't know how. A broken seal, a careless movement, contaminated air cycling through the ventilation. But within a week, Sarah was showing symptoms. Fever, cellular changes visible under microscope. Her blood was full of the bacteria, and it was rewriting her biology. We tried antibiotics, tried everything we had. Nothing worked. The bacteria was too adapted, too aggressive. It incorporated the antibiotics into its structure, used them to fuel more mutations. Sarah lasted 3 days. By the end, she wasn't human anymore. Her organs had restructured. Her skin had hardened into something like scales. Her eyes, God, her eyes had split into compound structures, like an insect's. She couldn't speak, just made clicking sounds with a mouth that had too many parts. She died, or we thought she died. Her breathing stopped, her heart stopped. We prepared to jettison the body, get it off the station before the bacteria spread. But she moved, got up. Her restructured eyes looked at us, and she ran. Fled to the lower levels, into the flooded sections we used for external access. Disappeared into the water outside the station. The rest of us sealed the upper levels, activated quarantine protocols. But 2 more crew members were already infected, showing symptoms starting to change. The station commander sent a distress signal, emergency evacuation, but we were 4,000 meters down. Evacuation would take 24 hours minimum. We didn't have 24 hours. The infected crew members were changing faster than Sarah had. Their minds were going. They attacked the others, trying to spread the infection, trying to make us like them. We fought, sealed them in compartments, pumped those sections full of chlorine gas, killed the bacteria and the hosts. 6 crew members dead. 6 of us left, locked in the command module, waiting for evacuation. That's when we heard the scratching. Something was outside the station, on the hull. We could hear it moving, scraping against the metal. Multiple somethings. The external cameras showed shapes, human-shaped but wrong. The infected crew members who'd escaped into the water, they'd survived somehow, adapted to the pressure and the cold, and they wanted back in. The evacuation bathysphere arrived. We sealed ourselves in, left the station, ascended as fast as we could. Below us, we could see the shapes following, clinging to the bathysphere's hull, trying to climb up with us. We made it to the surface. The shapes let go at about 2,000 meters, couldn't handle the pressure change. We watched them sink back into the darkness. The station was scuttled, flooded and detonated, destroyed to prevent the bacteria from spreading. Official story was structural failure, equipment malfunction. But I know what's down there, what's still down there. The infected crew, mutated beyond recognition, living in the deep where the bacteria made them capable of surviving. Changed, adapted, no longer human. Evolution doesn't care about what we want. It just makes things fit their environment. And if the environment is 4,000 meters of toxic, plague-ridden ocean, evolution will make something that can survive there, even if that something used to be human. Case: the CO2 scrubber. Saturation diving is brutal. You live in a pressurized habitat for weeks, your body saturated with inert gases, making excursions to depth to do work, then returning to pressure. It's efficient. It's also psychologically devastating. I was on day 18 of a 28-day saturation dive, 200 meters down, when the CO2 scrubber started failing. CO2 is deadly. Even small increases in atmospheric CO2 cause cognitive impairment, hallucinations, eventually unconsciousness, and death. Our scrubbers removed CO2 from the habitat's air, kept us alive. When they fail, you have hours before things get bad. We noticed the failure at 0300. Alarms woke us. The chief engineer, Davis, said the scrubber cartridge was exhausted. We had a backup, we'd swap it out, be fine in an hour. But the backup was bad, contaminated somehow during storage. When we installed it, the CO2 levels kept rising. We were at 3,000 ppm and climbing. At 5,000 ppm, you start getting symptoms. We called the surface, told them the situation. They said they were working on a solution, sending down a new cartridge with the dive bell. It would be 4 hours. We were at 4,500 p per m when the hallucination started. I saw my father. He drowned when I was 12, fell through ice on a lake, couldn't get out. Now he was standing in the habitat with me, water dripping from his clothes, ice crystals in his hair. He looked at me and said, "You're going to die down here?" I knew it wasn't real, knew it was CO2 poisoning affecting my brain. But he looked so real, so present. I could smell the lake water, the cold. Davis saw his wife. She died of cancer 3 years ago. He was talking to her, arguing with her, telling her he'd done everything he could. She wasn't listening. The third crew member, Jenkins, was staring at the viewport. Said there were people outside. Dead people. All the divers who died doing saturation work over the years. Floating in the water, looking in at us. I tried to ignore my father, focused on work, on breathing slowly, conserving oxygen, keeping my mind clear. But the CO2 kept rising. 5,000 ppm, 6,000. My head was pounding, my vision was blurring, and my father kept talking. He told me how it felt to drown. The cold water in his lungs, the panic, the fading consciousness. He said it would be the same for me, that the habitat would flood, that I'd drown like he did, that we'd be together. Jenkins was screaming now, said the dead divers were trying to get in, pounding on the viewport, clawing at the hull. Davis was on the floor, unresponsive, still mumbling to his dead wife. At 7,000 ppm, I started seeing them too, the faces at the viewport. Pale, waterlogged, dead, mouths open, eyes vacant, hands pressed against the glass. And I recognized some of them, divers I'd worked with, friends who'd died in accidents over the years. They were calling to me, beckoning, telling me to open the hatch, to let them in, to join them in the water. I almost did it. My hand was on the hatch wheel, turning it, when the dive bell arrived. The new scrubber cartridge came down. Surface crew talked me through the installation over comms. The CO2 started dropping. 6,000 ppm, 5,000, 4,000. The hallucinations faded. My father disappeared. The faces at the viewport vanished. Davis came too, confused and disoriented. Jenkins was catatonic, staring at the empty viewport where he'd seen the dead. We completed the saturation dive. 28 days total. But those 4 hours between 3,000 and 8,000 ppm CO2 felt longer than the entire rest of the dive. I still see them sometimes. My father, the dead divers, in dreams mostly. But sometimes, when I'm diving, when I'm deep and the water is dark, I'll see a face. Just for a second. A glimpse of something pale and waterlogged, looking at me from the darkness. The doctors say it's PTSD, trauma from the CO2 poisoning, that the hallucinations were real, chemically induced but real to my brain at the time. The memories stuck. But I wonder, what if CO2 poisoning doesn't create hallucinations? What if it opens something, makes you see things that are actually there, just beyond normal perception? What if my father was really there that night? What if all those dead divers were really outside the viewport, watching, waiting? What if they're still there, just beyond what we can normally see, waiting for our minds to break open enough to perceive them? I don't saturate dive anymore. Can't do it. Can't spend weeks in a pressurized can, trusting my life to machines that can fail, trusting my sanity to chemical scrubbers that might stop working. Because if the CO2 rises again, if my mind breaks open like it did that night, I don't know if I'll be strong enough to resist. Next time, I might open the hatch, might join them in the water, might become one of the faces at the viewport, calling to the next diver, beckoning them to come deeper. Case. The Siren Song. The wreck was a German U-boat from World War II, sitting at 180 meters off the coast of Portugal. I was part of a technical diving team documenting the site, taking measurements, photographing the exterior. The wreck was intact, resting upright on the seafloor, hatch closed, conning tower still standing. The crew had gone down with it. 70 men entombed in the metal hull, never recovered. We'd done 3 dives already, documented the exterior, mapped the site. On the 4th dive, I was alone. My buddy had equipment trouble, stayed on the boat. I descended solo, against protocol, but within my skill level. At the wreck, I started my photo survey, working my way along the port side, documenting the damage, the marine growth. That's when I heard it. Singing. I know that sounds insane. You can't hear singing underwater. Sound doesn't work that way, but I heard it. A voice, multiple voices, coming from inside the wreck, singing in German. I stopped moving, listened. The singing continued. A naval song, I thought, something the crew would have known. And it was coming from the closed hatch. I swam to the hatch, put my hand on it. The singing got louder, clearer. I could make out words now. A song about going home, about seeing families again. The hatch wheel moved. I didn't touch it, didn't try to open it. But the wheel turned, slowly, metal groaning. The hatch was opening, from the inside. I should have left, should have kicked away from the wreck and surfaced immediately, but I was transfixed. Watching the hatch open, hearing the singing get louder, wondering what I was going to see. The hatch opened fully. Darkness inside. The singing stopped. Something reached out. A hand. Waterlogged, pale, fingers too long. It grabbed the hatch rim, pulled. Another hand appeared, then a head. A face that had been underwater for 70 years, preserved by the cold and the depth and something else. Eyes open, mouth moving. It was singing again, beckoning me, calling me inside. I swam closer. I don't know why. It was like the singing was pulling me, overriding every survival instinct. I reached toward the hatch, toward the hand, almost touched it. My dive computer beeped. Bottom time exceeded. I had to ascend. Now! The beeping broke the spell. I kicked backward, away from the wreck. The thing in the hatch reached for me, fingers extending impossibly far. I felt them brush my fin. I ascended. Fast. Too fast. Hit the surface and climbed onto the boat, shaking, hyperventilating. The captain asked what happened. I couldn't explain. We went back the next day, brought a camera, documentation equipment. The hatch was closed, sealed. There was no way to open it from the inside. The mechanism was external only. And when we reviewed the footage from my dive, there was nothing. No hatch opening, no hand. Just me swimming up to the wreck, hovering at the hatch, reaching toward it. But I heard the singing. I saw the hand. I felt the fingers touch my fin. The captain told me stories, said that wreck was known for strange occurrences. Divers reported hearing things, seeing things. One diver went missing 3 years ago. Solo dive, never surfaced. They found his gear on the wreck, found marks on the hatch wheel, like someone had tried to open it from the outside. They never found his body. The theory was he got entrapped somehow, caught in wreckage, drowned, drifted away. But I think he went inside. I think he heard the singing, saw the hand, and followed it into the wreck. I think he's still there, with the crew. 70 men and 1 diver, entombed in the hull, singing their songs, waiting for someone else to join them. I don't dive wrecks anymore, especially not war graves, because I think the dead don't rest easy in those metal tombs. I think they're trapped, aware, calling out to anyone who gets close enough to hear. And if you listen to their song, if you follow their beckoning hand, you'll join them. You'll become part of the crew, part of the wreck. Another voice in the singing. Another hand reaching out from the darkness, calling the next diver inside. Forever.